The Epstein Files, Part 10. Death in Custody, Collapse, Confusion, and Unanswered Questions. On the morning of August 10, 2019, the case changed forever. Jeffrey Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. He was later pronounced dead. The official cause, suicide by hanging. The immediate consequence, the criminal case ended. But the questions did not. They multiplied. This episode does not speculate. It does not assign blame. It examines what is known, what was documented, what failed procedurally, and why the death of a defendant in custody became a moment of institutional crisis. Because when a case ends without trial, truth does not conclude. It fractures. At the time of his death, Epstein was being held without bail on federal charges of sex trafficking minors. He had pleaded not guilty. He was awaiting trial. The legal process was active. The stakes were high, and the scrutiny was intense. The Metropolitan Correctional Center is a federal detention facility designed to hold high-profile defendants. It is equipped with surveillance systems. It operates under strict protocols. It exists to ensure custody, not carelessness. Yet on that morning, multiple safeguards failed. According to official reports, Epstein had been removed from suicide watch weeks earlier. This decision was administrative. It followed a prior incident in his cell that had resulted in medical observation. The exact nature of that incident was initially disputed, later classified as a suicide attempt. The classification mattered because it informed protocol. Once removed from suicide watch, Epstein was placed under standard supervision. This included regular checks by correctional officers. These checks were not performed as required. Video surveillance footage was unavailable. Records were incomplete. The timeline became uncertain. The guards assigned to Epstein's unit later acknowledged that they had fallen asleep during their shift. They falsified records. This admission did not explain everything, but it explained enough to raise alarms. Within hours of Epstein's death, public trust eroded. Not because suicide in custody is unprecedented, but because the failures were layered, systemic, predictable. The immediate reaction was global. Media coverage intensified. Speculation surged. Theories proliferated. Much of it unverifiable. Much of it misleading. This episode does not engage with that noise. It focuses on structure. The death of a defendant in custody triggers automatic consequences. Criminal charges are dismissed. Trials are canceled. Testimony is lost. Cross-examination never occurs. Evidence is never tested in open court. This is not symbolic. It is procedural. For victims, the impact was profound. The trial had represented a chance for public accountability. A forum. A record. With Epstein's death, that opportunity disappeared. Civil cases continued, but criminal resolution did not. The Department of Justice launched internal investigations. The FBI examined facility procedures. The Attorney General described the failures as a perfect storm of screw-ups. The language was notable because it framed collapse as coincidence. Yet institutional failure rarely requires conspiracy. It requires neglect. It requires underfunding. It requires exhaustion. It requires systems that function on assumption rather than verification. The Metropolitan Correctional Center itself was later described as understaffed, overworked, and in decline. Warnings had been issued long before. Audits had identified problems. Nothing had fundamentally changed. In the weeks following Epstein's death, attention shifted. From legal process to institutional competence. From guilt to governance. The question became not only how Epstein died, but how the system allowed it to happen. Autopsy results confirmed suicide. Independent medical examiners disagreed on interpretation. The disagreement fueled public mistrust. But disagreement is not evidence. It is uncertainty. And uncertainty thrives in absence of transparency. What remains indisputable is this. The system failed to preserve the trial. It failed to preserve testimony. It failed to preserve closure. Epstein's death did not erase evidence, but it erased a central figure. And with him, the possibility of full judicial examination. This matters, because trials are not only about punishment, they are about record. In the absence of trial, the narrative fragmented. Some focused on institutional failure. Some focused on speculation. Some focused on silence. Few focused on consequence. This episode does not claim that answers were hidden. It demonstrates that answers were never reached. And that distinction matters. The death of a defendant is not justice. It is interruption. It leaves systems exposed, processes unfinished, and trust diminished. In the months that followed, civil litigation continued. Documents were unsealed. Names were debated. Reputations were challenged. But none of it occurred under the discipline of criminal court. This episode marks a turning point, not because the story ended, but because the legal pathway collapsed. From this moment forward, accountability would take a different form. Fragmented, indirect, incomplete. In the next episode, we examine what came after Epstein's death, how institutions responded, how narratives shifted, and how responsibility dispersed rather than resolved. End of Part 10.